Welcome back to Metaphysical Girl, a podcast all about the intersection of art and esoterica. I'm your host, Saint, and this week on the pod, we have a super exciting interview with Hannah Whitten, a New York Times bestselling author of fantasy, horror, and romance, and one of my dear personal friends. Me and Hannah had a grand old time giggling and gabbing, talking about everything from rebuilding a sense of self after leaving conservative Christianity, writing religious trauma narratives, learning to love horror, and the strategies that we use in our writing process to find the story that wants to be told and tell it the way it deserves to be told. I'm so happy you guys are here, and so without further ado, let's step into the metaphysical world together. I am so excited to be here today with Hannah Whitten, also your amazing tattoos that I'm incredibly jealous of.
Thank you. Please get one.
I'm so close. I've started filling my ears with piercings. We're working up to it.
Ooh. Yeah. Gotten my cartilage done twice and it's rejected both times. And I got my tragus like 3 weeks ago and literally just ejected out of my ear. So I guess I'm not meant to have cool earrings.
I guess not. I'm literally getting my tragus done this week. I like getting pierced. I'm insane. I enjoy the process.
I like getting tattooed, so I understand.
Would you please introduce yourself to the audience and your body of work?
Everything I've published thus far has been fantasy, but my horror debut is coming out this year. Stepping into what I want to be as an artist with that. There's the Wilderwood Duology came first, 2-book series, fairy tale retelling. It's got Beauty and the Beast. It's got Red Riding Hood. It's got Sleeping Beauty. It's got Snow White. It's got Orpheus and Eurydice and Hades and Persephone too, because I love lots of things and I shoved everything that I like into those books. There's Nightshade Crown, complete trilogy, starts with the Foxglove King, and that is my religious trauma trilogy.
You said you had Reliquary coming out as well.
Oh yes, and then Reliquary. Reliquary is coming out this year. It is an oceanic horror with Ready or Not vibes. The whole reason that I wrote that book was because I watched the movie Ready or Not, and I was like, this is a perfect film. The only thing that would make it better is if the Samara Weaving character and the Adam Brody character had kissed. Nightshade Crown came about because I got pissed off at Rise of Skywalker. Me getting irritated by choices that certain media has made and be like, I am going to do this but better, has been a running theme in my body of work.
Oh, no, absolutely. Dowry of Blood is solidly... I had notes about a variety of Dracula movies. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to fix this in one go.
Yeah, I can consolidate these notes. I was actually thinking in the car while I was driving, how long have Saint and I known each other? And it was like 2017 or 2018. Like it's coming up on 10 years.
I became friends with you the year before your debut, maybe?
I think something like that, yeah.
I think I met you after the announcement and before the publication. So whenever that was...
I had such a creative crush on you because the way that I found you was back when Twitter was a thing. I believe it was a Mary Magdalene poem. It made me weep.
And I was like, great news, I'm obsessed with you. But you are one of the greatest things to come out of that experience. And it's such a pleasure and a blessing to watch you continue to grow as an artist and a person. Would you tell us a little bit about your spiritual background?
So I grew up evangelical. I was actually in the Nazarene church. My family back generations has been Nazarene, which is like a step back from holiness, if you're familiar with the holiness church. Not nearly as strict, but stricter than like your Southern Baptist. I grew up in that. It was just kind of expected. It never even occurred to me, literally until I was an adult, that was something that I did not have to do. It wasn't really until I was an adult that I thought of it as being something that maybe I wouldn't want to even. Whenever I went to college, I got involved with an on-campus ministry. Still kind of think of that particular ministry as like the only church that I have ever been a part of that felt like it was actually doing what a church is supposed to do. It was very much about outreach, meeting people materially where they needed help. Like it wasn't proselytizing. It was, hey, we can go to this neighborhood that has some low-income folks and we're going to have a barbecue so people can come and like get hot dogs. If you end up talking to them about church, cool, but we're feeding people. And that was an offshoot of another church that was in my college town. And so we ended up going to that church. Really, like the reason that ministry was like what it was because of the one guy who was running it. And then he ended up moving. And it kind of took us a few years of being involved in the larger church to realize that he was the exception. We were still very involved and there were still good people in that church who were trying to do good things. It's just the institution of it was not the institution of any evangelical church really is not concerned with actual material help. And so we stopped going after our first kid was born around 2016, which kind of crystallized, oh, this is not something I can be part of in good conscience any longer. So haven't been back to church since then. I would love to say that I have a really rounded, coherent spiritual practice right now. I don't. I'm still kind of floundering around.
I think the floundering is the human spiritual experience, though. The experimentation in the journey and not like having a practice that feels coherent, that looks coherent to the outside.
I still pray occasionally, read the Bible with our kid at night because she requested it, but I'm gonna read the stuff about like easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. That's the kind of stuff that we're reading with her. Whenever she visits grandparents, like they take her to church sometimes and we're fine with it. Whenever she has questions, we tell her, well, this is what some people believe and this is what other people believe. And you have to decide what you think and respect what everybody else thinks, within reason. And the most important thing to know is that you don't know. I guess if I have any unifying philosophy, it's that. It's just that I don't know. The whole point of why we're here and of any spirituality at all is to make the people around you's passage through the world easier.
Thank you for sharing. That's really beautiful. I think it's a journey that a lot of listeners will resonate with, especially people who are raised in the evangelical tradition, whatever flavor that takes. In my background, it was always like, oh, we're non-denominational, but it's functionally evangelical. What would Jesus do late 90s, early 2000s? Cultural dominance with guitars and rock and roll kind of thing going
Yeah.
on.
I do still listen to Switchfoot sometimes. So
I have a couple of bands I will still listen to. Switchfoot is very high on the list. When you're finding your way out of a worldview that has so shaped your life, it can often feel pretty isolating and like you don't have even a little lamp to know where you're going in the process. But I love what you said about knowing that you don't know and surrendering to the not knowing, following your conscience and your heart where it leads you. I think that's a really good compass to follow in these processes, which can feel so destabilizing.
struggled a lot whenever I was first starting the deconstruction process with this very structured framework that I was taught. This is right, everything outside of it is wrong. And you can know that, you can rest in that. Instead of realizing that things are way more complicated than that, my initial response is to be like, okay, I just have to find a different framework.
Totally.
So I just have to find who's gotten it right. And so I would jump from one thing to the next, being like, okay, so all these people have it right, right? And it wasn't even like religion so much, although that was a part of it. It was the yoga girlies, they know. All of the Twitter socialists, like they know. And then as happens on Twitter, there's always some sort of destabilization within those communities. Things break down and it's like, oh, okay, this person was not practicing what they preach. They were not who I thought they were. Okay, so does nobody know? Do none of us know?
Are we all flawed humans? I hate it here.
Whenever it came time to actually put that into practice, it was very destabilizing. There's not a single person that I can find that has it figured out and I can just model after that person and then I'm right.
Your body, your nervous system, your heart, the whole system doesn't have practice, not being in a framework and a paradigm. You can deconstruct so many layers intellectually or theologically or ethically. And that is its own challenge, but it's sometimes those beliefs that are so foundational that I find will just stick around for a long time and drive my behavior. And then I'll be like, I believe this really specific, unhelpful thing about myself. And it's amazing how it can impact so many different layers of our life. We don't always have to deconstruct, get everything right in one go. But I'm the kind of person who's very all or nothing. I want to know. I want to be pointed in the right direction, full speed ahead.
Mine is like I want to be right and I want to be good because of the evangelical of it all that I was raised in. That's very like you are not good. You have to have some outside force that lends you goodness. Purity culture of like by virtue of being a sexual being, you are bad. That's something I still spend a lot of time deconstructing, not necessarily in like a sexuality sense. These bedrock beliefs that goodness cannot come from within you, that you cannot trust your own perceptions of what is good. And so you have to look for outside influences that are going to validate that.
That is something that is so deep and can be so insidious. You get that strong orientation towards good with a capital G. You're always chasing this impossible high standard. and kind of losing yourself often in the process. But then I also have this double header of like, your emotions are untrustworthy and there are just things about you that need to be controlled. Like you're just kind of dangerous in your natural state.
You are responsible for the emotional states of everyone around you. And if anyone around you seems to be like not happy, it is your job to fix that.
It is your job to fix it. Exactly. And those are like three very dangerous things combined together. This happens to everyone, but I think women, people who are socialized as girls, young girls in these spaces, brother, MK Ultra, truly microwaving your brains.
No one can gaslight me like I can gaslight me.
So much of what we experience emotionally and spiritually does impact people that we become and the art that we make in the world. Like you said earlier, Nightshade Crown is your religious trauma series.
Boy, howdy, is it? Yeah.
You wrapped this trilogy last summer.
I
Huge
did.
accomplishment.
Thank you. I lived, bitch.
I'm revising book 2 in a trilogy right now, and I'm like, this could go one of two ways.
I am a book 2 girl. You can go just balls to the wall insane because you don't got to wrap it up right now.
You know the world. Now you get to play in the sandbox that you built.
Exactly. It's the playground time.
You can also, like you said, do the wildest shit in book 2. And then we get to book 3 and we're like, oh,
I have, in the words of T Swift, girl boss too close to the sun.
but you did it. Hello, Seekers. Saint here to remind you very quickly that Metaphysical Girl is a listener-supported podcast. So if you like what you hear here, please follow this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and consider joining the Metaphysical Girl community over on Substack at saint.substack.com. That's where you can get access to twice monthly long-form essays, private tarot readings with me, and of course, the Metaphysical Girl After Dark episodes, where we go darker, deeper, and a little bit more mystical with the subject matter. Thank you for listening and for all of your support. Nightshade Crown is your religious trauma series, as you said. So I would love to give you an opportunity to talk about why this is your religious trauma series and also why that felt like an important theme for you to explore in the work.
Religious trauma is something that I've been exploring in my work. I didn't really understand that that's what I was doing at the time. By the time I had wrapped For the Throne, a big chunk of that series had been about the stories that we are told and how there's bits and pieces of truth, but they can be cobbled together in entirely different meanings. Going into Nightshade Crown, I was kind of like, oh, this is what I'm writing about. I guess we're going to lean into it now. And it took me a little bit to find my footing with that because so much of Nightshade Crown came from me being upset at the Rey Palpatine storyline. It came from me being afraid that I could only write woodsy atmospherics with very limited casts. So there were all these pieces that came together like, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. We're going to shape it all together and see what comes out. As I was writing it, especially once I made Gabe a monk, I was like, oh, this is what we're talking about. And Gabe was me. I had been on a deconstruction journey for a while. So Lore was kind of who I wanted to be at the time, where like she was very jaded. She didn't really believe in any of it. She was like, I've seen all this and I know it's bullshit. But yet she's the one that keeps being like tugged back into it because she has this deep-seated power in the book. I didn't really like think of it as a power. It was more something within her is still being drawn into this stuff that she thinks is bullshit. Gabe was very resistant, like being shown that the things that he had invested his life in were bullshit, trying his best to find ways that he did not have to engage with it. Like, oh, well, I can be one of the good ones kind of thing, which all falls apart by the end. And Bastion was like, I don't fucking care if it exists or all. I'm having a good time. I'm comfortable where I'm at. And if I start to interrogate this stuff, I'm not going to be comfortable anymore. So getting to kind of delve into the way that each of those characters dealt with what they'd been given and how it all unravels into the same place was an interesting journey. And again, one of those things that I didn't necessarily understand that that's what I had done until the series was over, which happens for me a lot. I can have an idea going in of this is what I'm going to do, but it's often not until I have told the story that I can see the themes that I'm working with.
I'm very, very similar.
If I'm writing it, it's because I'm having a good time. First and foremost, I am my own target audience. I've been writing since I was a kid, and the whole reason that I did whenever I was a kid was to entertain myself. I read all the Saddle Club books in the library, so I started writing my own Saddle Club book. If I am writing, it is to delight myself. Then I get to the end, and it's like, okay, what was my subconscious like doing while I was doing this? And then I can kind of look at it and understand, oh, this is what I'm talking about.
Having this experience with the Unearthly Delights trilogy where I knew some of the themes going in. I knew the story I wanted to write. I'm having a great time. And it wasn't until I was really into the writing that I was like, this is a generational trauma book. The whole series is just generation after generation of fruit of the poison tree, the sins of the father. How do we break the cycle? I didn't know this at the time, though. I'm vibing. There's no way that the series could even possibly exist without that backbone of the theme. But I didn't know at the time. I had some funky little guys I wanted to put into situations.
Yeah. Put that man in a situation. That's how it always happens for me. Not with Reliquary, but with what comes after. I'm kind of in a weird spot because I feel like with Nightshade God, I said what I wanted to say on the religious trauma question and wrapped things up with, we don't know what we don't know. Your job is to be good to people. And now I'm working on something and I'm not writing about religious trauma anymore. And I'm kind of floundering around because I'm like, what am I writing about then? And I'm not gonna know until I get into like the second draft, but it's daunting. It's weird because it's the book that I've been trying to write since I was like 16. Like I've had this idea for 20 years at this point. I was obsessed with Holly Black. And so I like wanted to write something that was in that similar vein of like, what if there's just like fairies in your tiny town? Like, what do you do with that? I think that I'm writing about identity, but I'm not sure yet.
Nice, specific, not at all vague or
Not
overwhelming.
at all vague or overwhelming or something that I wrestle with on the daily. We're going to see how that goes. I wrote the first draft. I revised through to like the last 100 pages, and my brain felt like it was dripping out of my ears. I could not sit down and look at this anymore. So I bolded text and I was like, this is where I stopped. I know it's a mess. I know that there's all this stuff that I need to do. I cannot look at this anymore. I sent it to my agent.
Whatever you have done to your agent and editor is not nearly as diabolical as what I do to them on the daily. For the listener at home, don't do this. This is not acceptable. I was adding whole chapters during second proof pass pages
Girl, baby girl.
for Savage Blooms. I've never done it quite that badly before. It does eat down. I was right to add them.
You were right. Like, it's an excellent book.
Thank you. But I had to apologize to Orbit after that and to the proofreader and be like, I will never do this to you again.
My God.
Yeah, we shouldn't have been doing this. But I did that. And then when I turned in the first draft of the second book, Tangled Roots, this is more acceptable, but it is just showing you that this is how we roll. What are you going to do? Tell me no. I personally love to say, what are they going to do? Stop me? And it's gotten me this far in life, but it's also gotten me into trouble. A lot of the ending chapters in the book were just kind of like a paragraph summary. And my editor knows how I work, and I do a lot of trial and error. I do multiple drafts, and I'm changing out whole plot points each time and character arcs to find what fits. So I was like showing her the pieces on the board, and I wanted her advice. But I'm sure to an editor who has not worked with me before, they would be like, there's something wrong with her. Something I did want to ask, though, the world that you created for Nightshade Crown is like glittery and corrupted and full of death and decay, and it's just like sumptuous, delicious. And the magic system is so beautiful and so intricate. We'd love to hear you talk a little bit about building that.
So it's very much Versailles based. That was the vibe in my head. That was the vision that I was going off of. Also, those images of where they have the Catholic saints, where they'll have just like a jawbone, but it's in this like huge, gorgeous, intricate, like jewel encrusted gold statue. That juxtaposition is something that I have always really loved. Those were the two foundational things that I was building off of. And my world building is very much you paint the base layer, you paint the mid layer. Like it's a piece by piece type thing. I started with the magic system. I'd already kind of done elemental magic, so I knew for this one I did not want it to be elemental in any way. But whenever I'm writing a magic system, I do find that I like for it to have like concrete elements. Like I need something tangible to base it off of. Like I have a really hard time with that if it's super ethereal. So I needed a set of opposites to work off of. And I was like, we'll just do life and death because like light and dark is kind of overplayed, even though that does come in. It's kind of interchangeable in Nightshade Crown. Okay, we're going to do a life and death magic system. Wrote the first draft with the life and death magic system, and I arrange the pantheon and the religious system around that magic system. because I knew where I was going in the overarching arc of the plot. I always try to know the end, but I don't really know how I get there yet. Then I can play around with the pieces in the middle and just see like what's the most interesting way that I can get there. Like I need to know the beginning, I need to know the end result. And everything in the middle is what is the best way to bridge this gap. That's why I have to rewrite my middles.
Like, okay, so now I know what the book's about. I'm going to go back to the beginning and do it differently.
Oh, I do the same thing. I write right up to the very end.
Mm-hmm.
I write up to the end, realize that I cannot write the end that is in my head because I have not set it up correctly.
But that shows you when you get to the end of seeing how you actually want to get there. We oftentimes, as creatives, see other people who really know their process talk about it in this very linear way, or we're given outlining strategies or master classes from authors that make it seem like it should just be XYZ equals book. But that's not true for anybody that I actually know. Once you understand the natural arc of your storytelling and how to get to the kind of book that you want to tell in a efficient but pleasurable and thorough way, that is the right answer. I used to feel really bad and guilty about hitting the midpoint, thinking I knew what was going on, and then having to go back and redo the book. Now I just know that's okay.
And sometimes what works for one book, like just because it works one way once doesn't mean it's going to for the next one. And so you have to get to a point too where if you think that you know your process, be open to it changing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you said, every single book is different. And I'm sure that Reliquary, because it is a standalone, its own different thing. And I'm really excited to talk to you about Reliquary in just a second. But I do want to give you your flowers as my friend with one of the best tastes in horror. I know that you really love the genre as a watcher, as a reader, as a writer. I love asking people what draws them particularly to horror. You know, what excites you about the genre?
So I'm kind of a latecomer to horror. Wasn't allowed to watch it or read it. So I think that my parents really hoisted themselves by their own petard with that, because the reason that I was so taken by it was because of that forbidden element. And also because I've always been like a little esoteric magical girly. And part of the reason why they didn't want me involved with this because they're like, well, that's just like opening the door to like spirits and magic and all this stuff. And I was like, really? How do I invite them? Completely a tangent. But my husband and my daughter play this video game called Phasmophobia. My husband plays it and my daughter like sits and watches until she gets too scared and then she hides. They do it every night. It's really cute. You can like pick your tools that you're going to use. And one of them was a Ouija board. She had asked me about one. A friend at school said something about it. And I was like, listen, don't ever touch one of those things. And she was like, why? Is it real? And I was like, we don't know. You don't need to find out. That doesn't need to be you. Anyway, that's completely beside the point. Back to me being a freaky little bitch whenever I was a kid. I think the first horror book I ever read was Wait Till Helen Comes by Mary Downingham.
Ooh.
It was a little ghost story, scared the shit out of me. Had looked at it in the elementary school library. Like every time I was in the library, I would look at this book like, am I brave enough to read that? One day, I finally checked it out. And I read it at school because I wasn't going to take it home because I wasn't supposed to have it. I loved it. Like I was like, I need to be scared more. This is what I want. So then I started checking out Goosebumps, leave them in my desk at school and not take them home to read them until I was reading, I think it was Ghost Beach. Didn't finish it at school, so I wanted to bring it home so I could read it. And so I left it in my backpack and I got home and I was like, I'm going to go play in the treehouse. Bye. Just like took my whole backpack out there, finished Ghost Beach in the treehouse, was too scared to get out of the treehouse. And then my mom came out and was like, are you okay? And I was like, I read a scary book and I'm really sorry and now I'm afraid to get out of the treehouse. Anyway, it would scare me every time, like to the point where I was like sleeping with the light on. I was having a time, but I wanted that. That was the addictive part of it. I didn't watch scary movies for the longest because that was the thing that my parents liked the most against. They kind of came around to me reading scary books just because they were like, we're just glad that you're reading and we can't really stop you. But scary movies was like the hard line. Come to find out, I actually talked to my mom about this recently, and she said that the reason she was so against us watching scary movies was because whenever she was in high school, she went on a date and saw My Bloody Valentine, and it literally kept her awake for months. So she was just afraid that we were all going to be little cowardly children and never sleep. I guess that's fair. I discovered Stephen King in high school and like ripped through all of his stuff. I think I read Watchmen, which wasn't necessarily horror, but was like kind of on the cusp. I read a lot of Chuck Palahniuk. I was insufferable. I didn't watch my first scary movie until I was in college. And it was The Ring, because I guess go big or go home. Some friends of mine had rented this tiny house together. We watched it at their house. And then I wouldn't go back to my apartment afterward. I was like, no, I'm going to stay here with you guys actually because my roommate's out of town. So I slept at their house for the rest of the weekend. I was in my friend Jen's room and I made her put a cardigan over the TV. Just like off to the races at that point. I think because story is my job, I don't really get scared anymore, and whenever I do, it's an intellectual, like, "Oh, that scared me. That was well done." I do occasionally come across stuff that legitimately makes me scared more in a "I am very afraid" way and less in a "I need to study this from a craft perspective" type way, but it's more rare now, and now I just watch it for the love of the game and read it. Big fan.
I love that. Do you have any favorite subgenres?
I really like anything as long as it's well done. The idea of folk horror more than I like it in practice a lot of times. There are a few that I really love, like the OG Wicker Man is great.
It's one of my favorite, like, top 5 movies of all time, and it is my favorite horror
Yes.
movie. But I'm a freaky folk horror girly, like, I'm very particularly obsessed with, like, pagan revival, neo-traditions, British folklore, the aristocracy controlling us through the stories we tell, so, like, it was made in a lab for me.
That is your oeuvre. That's what you're doing.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yes. No, for real. I love that one. There's a documentary called Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched that was on Shudder.
I just watched it.
Yes, it's excellent. I don't know if Hereditary really counts as folk horror, but I really love that one. I also really love survival horror, I've discovered about myself.
There's elements of that in Reliquary, though. Makes sense.
Yeah, people being thrust into really impossible situations and having to think quick to get out of it. One of my very favorite movies is, As Above, So Below. That's a survival horror.
One of my favorite horror movies ever.
Yes. And then there's The Ritual, which really, like, marries those 2 subgenres in just the perfect way.
I love, I love, I love. I am thinking of this because I'm wearing a Twin Peaks sweatshirt. I love Twin Peaks, which is many things, and I would say also horror. Fire Walk with Me, the film that is attached to Twin Peaks, that is survival film because spoiler alert is about the last days of Laura Palmer, who is one of our most famous beautiful dead girls of all time, but also I think one of the greatest characters in horror ever. But there's something so cathartic for me with this film, which like trigger warnings up and down, it's very difficult to watch. It's this young woman who is experiencing a level of suffering and distress, like at every level that you think no human should ever be able to endure. Seeing her fight for herself and fight for connection, even when she's being consumed by her own darkness, keeping her agency in every little way she can right up until the end, and even kind of saving herself spiritually in a way in the end is really beautiful. It's a very dark thing that I can only really experience with horror, but there's something so comforting about these stories that go to those really heavy emotional places that make us feel so isolated and make us love the people who are experiencing these things, even if it is, harrowing.
I love, in every genre, a bittersweet ending. Horror, I think, is typically my favorite place for that because of depths that you can descend to. If you're gonna take a person and put them in a really horrible situation, it's typically gonna be in the horror genre, you can do all sorts of shit. I'm not one of those people who gets upset if horror has a happy ending. I'm not one of those people who gets upset if it has a bleak ending. Like, every story has the ending that it should have. Appreciate the story that was given to you and understand that there's a reason why it ends the way that it does. There is something that, like, itches my brain, particularly with horror where someone comes out but not unscathed, and, like, they had to sort of make a way out, a way that can't really be categorized as bleak or as a happy ending. It's just an ending.
Before we move on, are you pro or anti Babadook?
I've only seen it once.
Yeah.
I liked it.
People have very strong opinions about the tone of the ending of Babadook.
Oh, okay.
Always argued, I do think fits the story that we were given and the experience that we were given. I would say that Babadook has a very happy ending. Some people really are like, this undercuts the horror. And I'm like, I think we got out by the skin of our teeth. I feel like this was earned.
I don't really think of it as a happy ending. The implication being, and again, I've only seen it once, the Babadook, which is the personification of this mother's trauma and depression that she's dealing with both as a mother and as a widow, lives in the basement and she feeds it. And to me, as a mother and as a mother who went through a really dark period with depression and anxiety and OCD, really, really worsening after I had my first kid, it isn't a happy ending because it's just kind of an acknowledgement that those things are always going to be with you.
Yeah.
And you have to deal with it as you can, and it's going to be an everyday thing.
Horror is, for me, the most powerful and comforting place to go to explore mental illness. As somebody with bipolar who has a variety of trauma, like it is always horror that I feel like can speak into that sense of the reality shifting around you and being your own worst enemy and feeling isolated from the world. But I always find such power and catharsis there. So tell me what we're doing in Reliquary in terms of the horror. Like, what was the most challenging, but also the most pleasurable part of writing this? And they could be the same or different.
Honestly, the character of Claire. Kind of both the answer for both of those. I am typically a very character first author. Like the characters kind of come to me before the plot does. Or that's how it was whenever I first started out. As I move along, I do often get a plot idea before a story idea now.
Sure.
And that's kind of what happened with Reliquary. I knew the basic plot and I needed to put figures in there to fill out the plot and then figure out who they were and why this plot would happen to them the way that it did. And with Claire, it took a lot of drafts to get to a point where she was not just kind of like someone that everything was happening to. Some of this book, it is just kind of everything is happening to Claire, but it's a conscious choice because of how Claire has dealt with trauma and who she has become because of it. That was an interesting needle to thread of being like, no, I want her to stay passive and accepting up until the 11th hour. Here is the thought process that she has behind this. And so building out her background trauma, how she's tried to deal with it, how it's informed the abusive relationship that she ends up in, how that relationship informs the way that she responds to Elias's family. She is someone very susceptible to love bombing because it is something that she did not get. And she acknowledges that about herself even, which I think is something that a lot of us do. Like we have so much therapy speak that's just like at our fingertips now that we can diagnose ourselves and we can therapy something to death without ever changing the fact that we're doing it.
Much harder.
Yeah. And we've come to a place where it's like, well, I acknowledged it. And so that's the work. The work is the acknowledgement and the knowing what's going on. And it's like, well, no, because then you have to take that kind of out of the realm of the mental and put it into practice. Claire has not done that yet. Claire is at the point where she understands what she's doing. She's fine with it to a point. And even whenever she gets to a point where she's not really fine with it, she's like, but it's going to be really uncomfortable to not do this. What's that? It was a Danish movie, and then they just did an American remake with James McAvoy. And I cannot remember the name of the movie, but the whole premise of it is that this family allows a guy to like completely terrorize them basically because they're afraid of being impolite. So that was kind of the vibe. There's so many times over the course of the book where Claire is like, this is really uncomfortable. I feel like something is off. I should leave. And then she's like, but it would make things so weird if I left. So weird and so awkward and so uncomfortable. And they've been so nice to me. And I'm probably just making too big of a deal out of it. Everything that she's experienced of relationships up to this point has made her believe that like a level of discomfort is required. She was very difficult. It was very rewarding whenever I felt like I got it done. I'm fully expecting an inundation of reviews that are like the too stupid to live heroine. And it's like, yeah, that was a choice.
I love why is she passive? Why does the person with trauma act traumatized heroine?
I feel like the advice that we get and the questions that we get from our editors so much is this character is too passive. How can we make them more active? And whenever I got that question, I have always in the past been like, yeah, you're right. I need to redo it, which was the correct move because that was the story that I was telling. And then this was the first time that I was kind of like, actually, I would like to keep her passive and explain why.
It comes down to knowing why we are making the artistic decisions that we're making. It really comes down to choices, to use theater words. And if you know why you're making a choice, that I do think often justifies the choice.
You're either making a choice actively or you're making it passively. You are either deciding this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to orient the text around doing this thing, or you are deciding this is kind of the corner that I've written myself into, or this is the thing that is going to make all of this go easier. So I'm going to do that. I have fully come upon things where it's been like, I could change all of this to make this work, or I could cut this one thing and like passively do that. I have absolutely done that and I will do it again.
I'm really excited about this one. What is the thing that you're most excited for the audience to experience about this book?
I I got to be really gross.
Yeah.
And it was fun. Anyone who's read my fantasy, I do like to have little moments of like body horror. I have been told before that it really like sneaks up on people. They'll be like, ah! I'm like, I didn't even think that one was that bad. But this one, it's bad and it's gross and truly upsetting in some moments. And I had a great time.
When does Reliquary come out and where can the people pre-order it?
It comes out August 11th and you can pre-order it at all the usual suspects, wherever
Um,
books are sold.
Do you hear that, my beautiful people? It is available for your pre-ordering now. And in case you're not aware, pre-orders are incredibly helpful to authors. It shows our publishers that we are good at our job and that they should give us marketing money and that they should buy our next books. Have a cheeky little pre-order and then you get a surprise. You're basically giving your future self a gift.
There's a link in my Instagram bio, but if you want a signed pre-ordered copy, you can get them from Parnassus Books, which is my local indie.
We love Parnassus. And what is your Instagram, Hannah? Is that the best place for people to find you?
It is H. Whitten Writes.
H. Whitten Writes. We'll put that in the show notes too so everybody can go and find you. It has been an absolutely over the moon pleasure to have you on the podcast, baby. This is truly a treat for
So
me.
nice. It's so good to see you and talk to you.
Yeah, I love you so much and I have such a great admiration for you. And when I was envisioning the first season, the first batch of Metaphysical Girl, I knew that I wanted to have you on. So I'm so happy that you were available. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys so much.